There are people that you learn from, and then there are people who change the way you think. If your health feels overwhelming and you are tired of chasing symptoms, and you're looking for a more calm, a more grounded way to understand what's going on in your body, you are in the right place. Welcome to Living Inspired. I'm your host, Rachel Carta. I'm a registered nurse, functional nutrition counselor, and life coach. This podcast is for women who are dealing with fatigue, stress, hormonal changes, sleep issues, and who want to feel calm, confident, and like themselves again, or even so much better. Here, we take a functional root cause approach to women's health, energy, and resilience. We talk about what's really driving the symptoms and how small, sustainable shifts can make a real difference over time. This is a space for clarity, for calm, and for whole person healing. Because feeling better isn't about doing more, and living an inspired life takes intention. It's about what your body, mind, and soul are asking for. And remember, we are all unique, everything is connected, and all things matter. So grab a notebook, a cup of tea, or listen while taking a walk, and let's dive into today's topic. Welcome to another episode of the Living Inspired podcast. I am here today with Andrea Nakayama, and she is one of the people who has changed the way I think in every part of my life. She is a pioneer in the functional nutrition space. She founded the Functional Nutrition Alliance, and this is where I went to nutrition school, and I can't wait to share with you more about that. This is why I think the way I think. She is why I do what I do in so many ways. What drew me to her work, yes, it's great learning about the body. It's great learning about nutrition and how we should eat and what's going to help our body function the best. But what I loved the most was that she sees the person, not the diagnosis, not the symptoms list, the person. That belief for her came from a really difficult season of her life, and we'll talk about that. She turned all of it, what she learned, into a framework. And this is changing the lives of so many practitioners that she has trained, thousands and thousands, right? But also the clients that are sitting across from them. Being one of those students, I cannot tell you how excited and honored I am to be sitting here with her today. Welcome to the show, Andrea.
Oh my gosh, Rachel, you're going to make me cry. I mean, just talking about how it helped you to change how you think. That is my biggest hope, that I help practitioners think differently, that you then go and help your clients and patients think differently, because the messaging we're getting about health is so broken. And so thank you for that beautiful and moving introduction. And I'm so honored to be here with you.
Oh, thank you. And I cannot wait to get into it because really you mentioned it, this broken, not just the brokenness of what we see, but also the absolute information overload that can just be its own nervous system overload, dysregulation situation. So let's back it up for a minute, because when you think about looking at the body differently, when I was thinking about this question, I had this image of myself sitting in nursing school, and I had my note cards. I was a really good student. I studied a lot for things. My note cards had all the symptoms listed, and on the other side, it would have the disease. So it was the symptoms, the disease, and then somewhere on that card was the medication that we used to treat that disease. Those
Yes.
cards are probably around somewhere, okay? But what you teach is completely different from that. And again, it has changed my life in every way. The way I interact, even with hospice patients, like just the way I think. Please help my listeners understand where that came from for you, and just anything else you want to add on to this way of looking at the body completely differently than what conventional medicine has taught nurses and doctors.
Yes, so much to say. I mean, I'm going to talk about what personally led me there, and we can talk about the systems that we think into. And I also have to say, I am in the process of writing a book where I go back in time and ask that question, how did we get here? What happened? And there is a point in history that got us here that we've been trying to reverse in all different ways ever since. But it's a really interesting point. So, just those three areas, and you know I love threes. So I'm going to start with what got me there to begin with, which you mentioned in my intro. The hard season of my life was when my late husband, Isamu, was diagnosed with a grade 4, very aggressive brain tumor in April of 2000 when I was just 7 weeks pregnant. We were just 7 weeks pregnant. And so that was my first kind of introduction or catapult into what I'm going to call the medical system. And I always like to remind folks, and you know this, that I'm not here to vilify the medical system. It does something, and it does something really well. And we were really fortunate to be in one of the best brain cancer epicenters in the country. We were at UCSF in San Francisco. So during that time, in those early days, what I recognized really quickly as an outsider, I wasn't in the healthcare space, as an outsider, I realized, wait a minute, people are treated like their diagnosis. We are our diagnosis to the medical providers. We are not Andrea and Rachel and Isamu. We are what we have.
Mhm.
And number two was that people with the same diagnosis are treated the same.
Mhm.
And those were alarming realizations to me because I had never experienced that. I saw the human through the humanities. I saw the individual. So the origins of my realization were there. Of course, it took many years for me to bring it into a practice and a methodology. Isamu at the time of diagnosis was given 6 months to live, not expected to see our son born. He lived 2.5 years, so he died when our son was 19 months old. That son now lives in Tokyo. He's 25 years old. So, that's a long time ago, but it really woke me up to what was missing. And I have devoted my life to filling that gap that I saw him have to live within.
Thank you for sharing that. And I was just, as you were talking, I was thinking about this beautiful way you honor Isamu's life. This legacy that you have
Yes.
built with him at the front
Yes.
and with the honoring of his life and how you have, just really embodied what medicine should look like, what
Yes.
what it should be like to be able to walk into a doctor's office or a hospital and be seen as who you really are, not the diagnosis, not the symptom. And you also said something so we all need to know is that we can't all be treated the same.
Right.
And when you think about that, all of our body systems, like you also teach, and I'll have you explain this maybe, what does it mean to have systems thinking?
Yes.
Because of that systems thinking, people cannot be treated the same.
Yes. Yes. And, if I go fast forward to the book and what I'm working on and researching now, there may be a place where in acute care, we do need to treat the diagnosis and the disease. And there
Mhm.
is a place for that to occur. So I don't know that we can turn just to medicine
Mhm.
to be where we look to be seen.
Mm.
And I have a piece coming out about pluralism on my Substack. And what I mean by that is there needs to be a number of practitioners. We lost our way and we're expecting everything
Mm.
from medicine. In fact, medicine transformed to this notion of health care. And so, as a patient population, we are looking to one area for all our support around health.
Mm.
But that system that is still medicine,
Mhm.
it's still medicine, it's not healthcare, it's medicine,
Mhm.
is there for acute care. People like you, people who are doing body work, people who are doing mental health work, we are part of a broader spectrum of providers that work in the time between those acute care situations. So, in many ways, I've come to realize that we're looking for too much
Mhm.
when we do walk into our doctor's office. Like, let our doctor do what our doctor can do in scope. Your doctor doesn't know anything about nutrition. Your doctor doesn't know anything about your mental health if they're not a mental health provider. They don't know anything about your environmental toxins or your stressors. They know about your disease.
Mm.
Great. Good. We need that.
Hmm. Hmm. What a great way to think about it. And when you're saying that, I feel the pressure come off
Yes.
because it's a little bit like an ecosystem. You build your own based on what you need, is what I'm hearing. So if
Yes.
you need nutrition support, you see someone who specializes in that. You
Yes.
mental health, you see someone. We can't expect it all to come from our doctors because that's not how the training is.
Exactly.
I recently interviewed a lifestyle medicine doctor who's traditionally trained, and she was a 30-year. She worked in acute care for 30 years, and she was explaining this is just not the system. So I
No.
love that you're reminding everyone listening that maybe we are expecting too much, and that it's okay for you to go and begin to build your ecosystem,
Yes.
your system of people here to support you.
Yes. And, the hint here is it used to be like that. So in 1910, a man named Flexner came in and created the model that was very biomedical. So the herbalists, the midwives, all the people who were doing the work between when you would have to go see a medical provider were all of a sudden on the wrong side of the line. And I think when I talk about pluralism, we need to bring back the other side of the line. And the beauty about what we do is we are seeing biomedically, but it's almost like, and I know we'll talk about this, the name of the disease doesn't matter. It's the human in front of us that matters. And that's bringing it together in a different way. And so I hope that notion of pluralism makes sense. We lost our way and we're looking to one kind of provider to be our be all end all. And it just doesn't work like that. It's out of their scope to do much of what we're asking them to do. And then similarly, sometimes people in other scopes like ours are trying to do things that actually belong in their scope. And so that's where we conflate it because we've really elevated what the doctor does as the way of delivering healthcare. Not true.
Yeah, really good. It makes me think about when when someone's building a house or they're doing housework, you've got someone who does your electrician, you've got your
Yes.
plumber, you've got your
Yes.
HVAC, you've got your painter,
Exactly.
and they have their specialties. Sometimes somebody knows a lot of things. I'm lucky because my husband knows a lot of things about how to do things, but I expect him to know everything because he has made this like expectation that he knows a lot of things. But in
Right.
reality, most specialties like that, they're really good at their electrician work or their plumbing, and we don't expect a plumber to fix your lights.
Exactly.
And so maybe if we think about it that way, we can have more almost permission to
Yes.
it's okay to hire someone else to help you with your nutrition and your mental health. Like it's that permission. I love that.
Yes. Yes.
So let's talk about this idea of narrative medicine and this idea of story,
Yes.
because when I sit with a new client, and I'm just going from my heart right now. When I sit with a new client and I've gotten a lot of information from them, I learned that from you to take a lot of information so that I can see connections between them, which I want to talk about the three roots. Okay. I can see those connections better. So I always say that some clients come in and they say, "Well, why couldn't I figure this out myself?" And I always say, "I have a counselor because we can't see the forest through the trees. It's very hard. We have to
Yes.
zoom out. Someone else has to zoom out so they can look." But one of the biggest things is, yes, I see root causes. That comes out, yes. But one of the biggest things I notice is when I'm reflecting back or asking questions about their story, what else was happening during the time your first autoimmune symptoms showed up? Or what else was happening when you first got that PCOS diagnosis? They start to make connections and they had never even considered that
Yep.
the weight of life has an impact on your physiology.
Yes. Yes. So well said. And I'm going to talk through the matrix and you bring it back down to earth for your listeners, like you did so beautifully with the, contractor, the house building analogy, which I love. And I think that, even when we look at something like perimenopause and menopause, which are getting so much attention these days, all of that, like you just said so beautifully, is the accumulation of what we lived until the point when there's a lot chemically changing in the body. Yes, the hormones are changing, but it kind of just surfaces all the things we've been living. It's not like it's this one thing that happened and oh my gosh, everything's off and has to be fixed. It's okay, this is the life I've been living, and this is how now this shift in my body is making that all feel. I hope that makes
Mhm.
sense. Like we
Yes.
live the accumulation of the life lived. And as we age, I think like that's the substrate. That's the beautiful sap, not the problem to be fixed. And
Mhm.
when we can sit with that, we start to make those connections. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what brought me to narrative medicine through the lens of the matrix, and I'll try to explain it in a way that people who can't see it or don't know it understand. So the matrix is divided into three areas that we are mapping about the individual, or we can think about for ourselves: the story, the soup, and the skill. When I entered the field 20 years ago, people were hyper fixated on this skill. How do I eat? How do I sleep? What kind of water do I drink? How am I supposed to exercise? Is it HIIT classes or is it yoga? Is it, reverse osmosis water? Is it the filtered water? Like everybody was obsessed with what I would call the skill: the sleep and relaxation, the exercise and movement, the nutrition and hydration. What do we do? What do I do? And that's where a lot of the noise is. What I watched over time is that people got kind of obsessed with the soup. And when I say the soup, I mean the body and the systems biology that you referred to, how the gut is connected to the brain, and the gut is connected to the liver, which is connected to our hormones, all of it. All of the ologies that we see different people for are all connected in the body. And people started to get hyper fixated on the fix coming from knowing the body. Oh, it's the mitochondria, it's the microbiome, it's the methylation. If you don't know, listeners, those words, don't worry about it. It's just what gets fed to us right now, hormones being a big one. But your hormones don't exist in isolation. That's the soup. Your hormones are part of an internal milieu. So I said the skill, the soup, and we still have the story. Before I go into the story, is there anything we can help ground about those two areas? Because I think it's where the most noise is coming from right now that comes at us as what we're supposed to be focused on.
Yes, absolutely. And I love how you described that. And when you think about, I always kind of joke about how in perimenopause, menopause, if you're on social media or any social media type or the internet in general, you've got a lot you need to do to be okay.
Yes.
You got to get that weighted vest. You got to get that creatine. You got to get that collagen.
Yes.
Wait a minute. You got to get the magnesium glycinate. You better be walking 17,000 miles a day. And
Lifting
yeah,
weights and
you better deal with your
yes.
trauma. Like, I mean,
Yes.
there's a lot of things that you kind of feel like you have to do. And if you
Yes.
don't do them, you feel behind. I get clients all the time that are like, "Oh my gosh, what?" And so I love how you mentioned that's where all the noise is. We get hyper fixated on what is the right workout. I mean, I was a personal trainer for 15 years, and
Yes.
even just figuring out, was it the kettlebells? Sometimes I even go work out now, and it's a little mixed up at this point after all that. Like, what do I focus on? So I've had to
Yes.
shift my thinking into, where am I in midlife and what does that mean?
Right.
So there is so much confusion there. And just to ground everything for listeners, there are such simple, small things that you can do in each of those areas. In my program, I call them the Vital Six. There are such simple things that you can do that make massive impact on your body. So we'll talk about some of those later, but I just
Yes.
want to put that in there right now so that If the overwhelm comes in, I also use what's called internal family systems. I want you to,
Love it.
hand on your heart for a minute with that overwhelm. So
Yes.
makes total sense. Of course you would be
Yes.
overwhelmed when the internet is screaming at you for everything you should be doing. So hand on
Yes.
your heart with that overwhelm and know that a grounded truth is that simple things really make massive difference. Not following some perfect protocol that someone wrote that worked for them, great, but may not work for you. So that's one thing I want to say about that. And you can add on if there's anything you.
I think the thing I really want to say that I'm also uncovering through my research is if we think about this, and this is a little empowerment tool for our pocket, the only person that benefits from a pause is you.
Hmm.
So the things that are coming at us at noise all have profit behind them, whether it's a person or a corporation or an industry or a shareholder. Everything that's bombarding us with what we think we should be doing benefits somebody else.
Hmm.
In order for us to figure out if it benefits us, we need that moment,
Hmm.
that hand on our heart, that pause. Wait, is that for me?
Hmm.
Is that something I need to do right now?
Hmm.
Is that part of my next steps? And we're not living in that world. We're living in a world where we type in a symptom, we get fed an ad, we hit click, and we buy. And we're doing that over and over and over. And we don't benefit from that.
Hmm. You said the only person that benefits from the pause is you.
Yes.
Listeners, take a moment and take a pause. You can even pause this if you want, but remember to come back and just be in the moment. Because the other part of that is that I also teach that your inner wisdom, your inner knowing, when the noise is moved aside, if that thing is the right thing for you to try, there is a deep inner knowing that will lead you there, and that
Yes.
you can then use it as a tiny experiment to test it out. Do I really enjoy this way of being in the world, or this certain, activity? Is this for me? So I love that you pointed that out, that so that we can be more in control of our decisions, so that they're coming from a place of wisdom, not from, remember everyone, your phone and all of it is designed to keep you clicking and keep you
Yes.
buying. I did an
Yes.
interview with someone not too long ago who was teaching us about that, and teaching us about how it's literally designed to make it difficult not to pick it up.
Yes.
And so, thank you for that reminder so that we all know that. To go into this, the middle part of the matrix, the soup, right? When we
Yes.
think about all those body systems and how they're working, all of those body systems you said are interconnected. That's really important to recognize, because in
Yes.
conventional medicine, again, like you said, it has such a beautiful place in the world. It's doing a great thing for acute care. If I break my leg, I know what to do. I know where to go. If I have a cut, like thank goodness, I know how to go get stitches, right? But in the realm of systems thinking, right? We've got all these separated specialties. We've got oncology, hematology, endocrinology. What am I missing? Cardiology. There's many, many, many,
Psychology,
yeah,
rheumatology. Yeah.
many, many ologies, right? And the,
Yes.
the interesting thing is they don't talk to each other.
Exactly.
I see that all the time. And when you talk about the soup, you're looking at this interconnected web, if you will, of how
Yeah.
these things are working together. So that's this important point. But I think what one point that I think you were making is that there are some there's some messaging coming that is kind of hyper fixated on this specific thing. Let's use an example of gut health is a good example, I feel like,
Hmm.
because there's a lot of this gut healing protocol will work for this.
Yes.
And in your opinion, that's not always the case.
Correct. And the idea of systems biology, where the soup is everything is connected, we know everything in the body is connected, is brilliant for our thinking, our analytical thinking as clinicians, that we can bring to help people see the connections. It's not, as patients, it's not our job to see those interconnections. As clinicians who do the kind of work that we do, that's where we bring a different level of expertise to the table. People who have turned that idea of something happening in the body into a skill You
Mm.
have to deal with your SIBO. You have to deal with your adrenal fatigue. You're like it's become this lingo that's then sold back to us. We're being told we're broken so that we can be sold the fix.
Mm.
And what's really going on is much more complicated than the average human, average, patient can figure out on their own, which is why we need some guidance to understand those interconnections.
I love that you said that because I think a lot of people think that they're supposed to be able to figure it out. I see that, I hear that all the time. I can't believe I couldn't figure this out. And I think I already said this, but it's really hard to figure it out on yourself.
Totally.
That's why the training is there for us as practitioners to see that. So you've
Yes.
explained the soup, you've
Yes.
explained the skills. Now let's hear about the story.
Yes. Okay. So we had the three areas: the story, the soup, and the skill. The soup is impacted by all the things you do and the skill. But that soup, that internal terrain, your gut issues, your fatigue, your migraines, all of it is also influenced by your story. And what I was finding as an educator of clinicians is that somehow the story was getting lost in the whole idea of client care. And so I went on a hunt for what I knew to be true because I know that joy, as we talked about earlier, that I think before we hit record, we were talking about joy a little bit, but that like, being moved, belonging, grief, all of those things, not just the big events in our life, but all the little things also impact our soup, our internal terrain. And so if we're not looking at that history, at that story with a fine ear, we are missing clues to how we can help ourselves and how we can help others. So I'm just going to say that in my quest, I started studying story in lots of different ways. Ultimately, it led me to the practice of narrative medicine, which is a practice for clinicians to really teach deep listening. But I think we can bring that practice to the patient, that there is an opportunity, like in that pause we were talking about, to be in our own deep listening. That wisdom that you spoke about, I think is really hard for us to access anymore. I think there's so much noise coming at us, not just from social media, media in general, from medicine, from our mothers, from our ancestors, that it's hard to get to that place of deep and radical listening of what is right for me or what's right for what I think I want or what I'm supposed to do. And so for me, it's those small moments that kind of wake us up and remind us of the little pilot lights that exist in us. You told me a story about a client who, was recalling that she loved riding her bicycle, right? Like those things that we did when we were young that would allow us to get into flow state before we had all the shoulds and the have tos. There are clues in our own threads of what we love to do and how they actually feed and fuel us that we can bring back in little ways that help us come back to our own body's pharmacy within, the healing potential that we have within us that isn't outside of us, that doesn't necessarily cost anything, but that is part of the equation of health. Does that make sense when we kind of ignite the story of me? What is the story of me? What is the evidence my body for each of us tells us
Mm.
that brings us back to our lifeblood?
Mm. When you're saying that, I'm thinking about a really great action step people could take right now from this episode. And it could be that you sit down and you think about where in my life have I felt either joy or calm, whatever the feeling is that you want more of. Maybe it's, excitement or like whatever that feeling is you really wish you had more of. If you could think about a time in your life where you had that, What were you doing during that time?
Exactly.
What was bringing that out in you? When you were saying that, I was picturing myself. I used to like to take a book. I'm the oldest of seven, so you can imagine that there was a lot going on in the house. And my dad at one point, he took a door, an old door, and he nailed it into a tree as a tree house for me. Okay, it was really just like a door in setup. And I used to take a book up in that door. It was in a big willow tree, and I loved being whenever there was a breeze and the willows were moving. And I used to love to read up there, and it was like a moment of quiet. And as I connect that to right now in my life, whenever I am wanting to bring down myself into a state of calm, of relaxation, I sit outside and I will read. And my favorite is when there's a little breeze. I never connected that to childhood until this moment. So,
Ah,
listeners, you can do that too. You can sit and think, when in my life did I feel that thing I want to feel? And can I recreate that in some new way?
yes. And the question may also be if nothing comes up for you from that and you're left feeling like, I don't know what I need or I don't know what I want. It might be going back to when in your life did you feel your best? Like, what's the time in your life? And then the next question, what was it about that time that helped you feel your best? It might have been certain relationships or spending more time with other, whatever is true for you. It might have been being outdoors more or working with your hands more. It doesn't have to be a big thing. I feel like sometimes when we talk about this, people are looking for the big meaning in life, and it can be the little things. I love projects. I love making stuff. When I was a little girl, third, fourth, fifth grade, I won the science fair every year. And it wasn't because I was good at science, because it was all soft sciences, birds, butterflies, and fish. That's what I did my assignments on. But I would make these projects. I would go in the basement and I would be there all day, and I would ask my mom to get me some other thing from the art store, or where can we find a refrigerator box, or all the things. And I still do that. I'm going to be 60 in just a couple of months. I still think in projects. What am I making? What am I doing? So it doesn't have to be like, oh, I'm really good at racing a bicycle or whatever. It can be these little things, like you said, of sitting in the breeze, reading a book.
Thank you for sharing that. And I can totally see you doing those projects and winning those science fairs. I can totally see that. I love it. There's two things I want to make sure that we hit
Yes.
on with what you said. I think it would be helpful if we could back it up a little bit to the idea. You mentioned the word terrain, and I'm sure that when listeners might have heard that, they might not have, but I really want them to understand more about that. So if you could describe for us the image of the tree with the branches and the
Yes.
three roots, because if anyone listening is wondering, what in the world are these two talking about?
Yes.
And what is a foundation of how they teach and what they do? I think this diagram says a lot. So if you could
Yes.
explain that, I think it will kind of ground us into why it matters to sit outside and read a book for a few minutes and all
Yes.
the other things of what we're doing.
Yes, and I know we're probably geeking out on a method that we know and understand. Hopefully, for all of you listening, it's applicable and you can see that this is a different way of thinking because it takes us out of the quick fix. So, this idea of root cause is something else that's being sold to us. It's become very noisy that we as patients have to find the root. And if we're not all better now and we're still experiencing symptoms, it's because we're wrong and we haven't found the roots and what root period. And what we do is think about it through roots and broader where those roots live. So any sign, symptom, or diagnosis that you are experiencing, and you can write them down, any sign, symptom, or diagnosis you are experiencing is a branch on our tree. It's what actually is expressing itself. What we want to do is think into what is leading to that expression. And that brings us to the roots and the terrain that you mentioned. So, the roots of any chronic issue, and what I mean by chronic is it's just not getting better. I've tried X, I've tried Y, I've tried Z, it's still persisting, are the genes, our digestion, and our inflammation. But those are big areas to address, which is why it takes time and it's not just one thing. And our genes live in the terrain or the soil that surround them of the epigenetic factors. And that's our food, our movement, our environment, and our mindset. Now, we could spend all our time on one of those things. Like, let me think about my mindset and how that's impacting me. And when I talk about mindset, it can feel like we're supposed to think better. And I don't want to put that on anybody. It's just, where are we bringing some of that joy and that difference in thinking into our lives? So the tree has branches, which are all the signs and symptoms. And then we come down from those branches into the trunk, into the roots, genes, digestion, and inflammation, and into the soil. So the soil around the genes, food, movement, environment, mindset. How do I work on ensuring that those things are nourishing me? And not all at once. That's a lot. Digestion, we think about it from a physiological perspective, the mechanical, the chemical, the structural, and the microbial. A lot of us want to jump to that microbiome fix that we're being sold. We can chew. We can just start by chewing our food, and we're doing a tremendous amount for our digestive function. And when we support our digestion, we support everything else, those branches. And inflammation, clear, calm, enhance, and modulate. And we might be clearing a food toxin or an environmental toxin. We might be clearing a relationship that doesn't serve us and those we love, that worries us. We might be clearing a career that, or an environment that isn't healthy for us. But that calm is critical. Without being in the parasympathetic dominant state, the rest and digest state, we cannot heal. And all that noise that we've been referring to keeps us in a sympathetic dominant state. What's next? What do I do? How do I do it? Who can help me do it? Why are they not helping me? That is a fight or flight sympathetic dominant state that the body cannot heal in. So again, we have this beautiful image of a tree that, if it's not thriving, we don't want to go and chop off the branches or chop off the leaves. We want to think, wait a minute, how do I help this tree to thrive long term? And that means we have to go to the source, the roots, but even broader, the soil. And our job as people is to nourish our soil. We can go to others to help us with the roots and the branches, but the soil is ours.
Hmm. Thank you for sharing that with us so we can understand a little bit more about the process. And as everyone is thinking about this image in your mind, and I'll put some kind of image in the show notes so that you could click on it and have an image to look at. When we think about that, two things I want to go back to, because you talked about nervous system and you talked about how we cannot heal in a state of fight or flight. You
Yes.
know, it's interesting. I see client after client after client coming in really activated. I'm not going to
Yes.
give them some kind of diet plan, because what would be the point? Coaching calls almost always start with grounding and centering, because we can't get anywhere if we don't start there. And I think you mentioned something that the way the world is, what's going on, it's just almost natural to be in that response mode. And if we bring
Yes.
it back to midlife, what I really notice and what I have seen is that there's this loss of resilience as our
Mm-hmm.
hormones are shifting. And so
Mm-hmm.
it's almost easier to be, not easier, but it's more of a, like, fight or flight becomes a normal, even more so as the hormones are fluctuating and
Yeah.
changing. And so when we think about that, we think about, we're just trying to get that quick fix of what's going to help me. Is it going to be this supplement? Is it going to be this hormone treatment plan? Because I also believe, when we talk, and maybe you could say a few words about this, that, you know, hormone therapy is amazing for people. But oftentimes, if we start there without without understanding what's actually happening in the body, symptoms can get worse for people.
Yes,
I was just making
absolutely.
an Instagram post about this literally today because I have seen this in clients. So maybe you could speak a minute about that, this whole
Yes.
midlife idea, and then we'll go back to the nervous system.
Yes, absolutely. So, what's happening is that we're being sold a lie. And let me just say, I am so glad we're talking about menopause, and I am so glad we're talking about hormone therapy. In one of the chapters of my book, I talk about my experience measuring my hormones and trying hormone therapy. Hormone therapy doesn't work for my body. I do not think hormone therapy is being offered in the right way often enough, and we're being sold the idea that it's a fix. I was even listening to a podcast this morning, and the commercials I'm hearing are, from a place that does hormone therapy online, and the founder is saying, like, I was having issues in perimenopause and I went to this place and they gave me hormone therapy, and people shouldn't be denied that. Sure, if that's what you need, but it's not the be all end all. And the hormones are part of that soup and exist in a terrain where there's a lot of other stuff going on. If you don't address that other stuff, it's going to come up elsewhere. Like you said, symptoms can get worse, not better. It's not bio individualized. So, I had a hormone panel. I went to 4 different providers to be a partner with me. All of them gave me a different idea of so there's not like one idea of what you do based on results, because we're not that far along in our understanding of hormones. So all this to say, I'm going to say in short, because I know I'm saying a lot of words. I am so glad we're talking about menopause. Menopause is a shift in your hormones. That doesn't mean that your hormone deficiencies are something that need to be treated with hormones.
Mm.
I'm not saying they don't have to be. There are people who have medical menopause. There are people who are drastically helped by hormone therapy, but not everybody is or has to be supported with hormones. There are other ways to get through this phase of life, but we're being sold this idea that that is the fix. It's another place that's gotten really, really noisy, and I'm afraid it's not to our benefit as women.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right about that. And I think the benefit is that if you want to do it, now you actually can get it, which is still not very easy. There's still a lot of misunderstanding around it within your own PCP, with your
Yes.
OBGYNs, and with the
Yes.
telehealth medication,
Yes.
the telehealth medicine places. I
Yes.
personally went to one, and I understand where we're going wrong.
Yes.
And you also said there's ways of navigating it without the hormones.
Yeah.
And I think that whether or not, in my opinion, whether or not you choose to or you don't,
Correct.
there's still foundational things that can set the stage for those hormones even having a chance to work for you.
Yes.
And a lot of times that's where we need to go back down to the basics. And I always think of
Absolutely.
the hormone hierarchy like you taught me. And I've,
Yep.
I've used that in talks that I've done many times because I'm like, if we have the bottom of that, if you think of a triangle, the very bottom is blood sugar regulation. The top is sex hormones. And there's
Yes.
things in between, hormones in between. So if we have dysregulated blood sugar, we are waking up and drinking a coffee in the morning and not eating anything. Our blood sugar is low. Maybe then we're having a quick bagel. The blood sugar is just not stable. It's like we blame the irritability, the mood swings, the lack of sleep on perimenopause. But wait a minute, let's back it up.
Yes.
Are we eating in a way that's supporting our blood sugar?
Yes. Are we eating in a way that's supporting our blood sugar? Are we sleeping in a way that's supporting our body and our hormones? Are we pooping in a way that's supporting our body and our hormones? If we bring hormones into a body that isn't detoxifying, and when I say that, I mean sleep and poop primarily and hydration, then we are just recirculating hormones that can give us those symptoms of feeling worse rather than better. And I am not at all vilifying hormone therapy. I am also not vilifying postmenopausal realities and glorifying the reproductive years. And I worry that when we are so fixated on not moving through the transition if we can. And we may need help on a number of fronts, but we're glorifying a time in our life that was meant for something very different, not just reproduction, but also a certain kind of acquiescence. And we get to have some boxy as we age into postmenopause and not be in the same situation as aging women that we were in a different stage of our lives. And I think it's my teaching as story, soup, and skill, which we've been talking about in this conversation. And I've put an overlay to that in the continuation or the evolution of my work that is society. What are we actually doing when we are talking through this lens? Perimenopause, menopause requires hormones. And I'm not saying it doesn't. I'm just saying it's very individualized. Not everybody does well on them. And the truth is, not everybody needs them.
That's very helpful to hear for anyone who's wondering, and just to know that, being able to, again, all those simple things that you do, they really do matter and they really
Huge.
do have an impact on your body. And I know that you and I could talk about all these subjects for so long. And I don't even think I looked at my questions this whole time, but I do just want to reinforce one thing that we talked about briefly, which is this nervous system component.
Yes.
Because I will say that after working with people for a few years now and seeing, dozens and dozens of women come in with these really dysregulated nervous systems. And when we're like that, okay, so let's just explain what that might mean for people. So you're just feeling very revved up. You have a hard time calming down. I always, a good way to think about this is when you're trying to sleep, you're ready to go to sleep, you're really tired, you lay down, and all of a sudden there's a symphony in your brain of everything you're supposed to do and what you didn't do. And all of that is like a sign that your nervous system is sort of stuck in that what's called a sympathetic nervous system, or that's also called fight or flight.
Yes.
And we are supposed to shift back and forth between
Yes.
sympathetic and parasympathetic, which is rest and digest. When we're stuck in that sympathetic nervous system, you said the body cannot heal.
No.
Say a few more words about that, if you would.
Yeah, I mean, when we're constantly in fight or flight, if we think about what the body is doing in fight or flight, let's say you are in, a different era of time and you're being chased by a bear. I guess you could be chased by a bear, and let's say you're being chased by a dinosaur, different era of time. So you are in fight or flight. You are using all of your resources. Everything you have in you is being used to flee and find your way to safety. We are now going into fight or flight for reasons, multiple, many at the same time, that are not that severe. And we have a harder time getting out of those times. So that person would run away from the dinosaur, find safety, and come into their rest and digest. Take a deep breath, and their body starts to do the other things it needs to do: reproduction, inflammation, digestion. Our body doesn't do those things well when we're in that sympathetic dominant. And if anybody's listening, not watching, usually when I say sympathetic dominant fight or flight, my body's leaning forward. And when I say parasympathetic, I'm leaning backward. And that's how it feels in my body. When I'm going, I'm in fight or flight. When I'm resting, I can lean back, I can relax. And so we are using the resources we need in our body to fight and flee when we are in a sympathetic dominant stuck place. We want those resources to do the other things, to allow our digestion to function, to think new thoughts, for our inflammation to do what it needs to do and not be on hyperdrive, but take care of what it needs to take care of. So that's the way I like to think about it: is where are your resources being used? And if we're constantly in that sympathetic dominant state, we're using them to react.
And when we're in that reaction mode, you mentioned that things like digestion, the lowering of inflammation, like it can't happen.
Yeah.
So that's where if you're trying, listeners, if you're trying something for your health and it's just not working, we might want to back it up to say, wait a minute, how often am I feeling calm? How
Yes.
often am I feeling rested? How often am I in that joy state? Or if you know, if joy feels like a really far place for you right now, even just a little bit happier, like how often are you there? And that could give you a really good lens to say, well, that makes sense why this isn't working. You know, it
Yes.
makes sense why something that you're doing, and it's not you, you're not the problem.
No.
You're not, you know, you're not messed up. It's just that your body might be stuck in that state, and you may have to do some things to help yourself get out of that. And it's very possible. But I just wanted to talk about that because it feels really important for people to
Yes.
know when they're on a healing journey. Like we could take a minute and just stop beating ourselves up for not doing
Yes.
enough. Like, let's just pause for everyone. Could we take a minute in just the knowledge that you're doing a lot for yourself, probably? If you're listening to this podcast, you're probably on the journey of healing. You're
Yes.
probably, you know, taking walks when you can. You're probably trying to get enough water. You're probably really just in this place of caring about your health, which is a beautiful place that not everyone lives in.
Yes.
And maybe you are doing enough in a lot of ways, but your nervous system is just stuck on. And maybe we can take a minute. You know, I had a client one time who had IBS really severely and had done all the things, had really struggled with, you know, she saw all kinds of different specialists. She saw, you know, functional practitioners. She did everything and nothing was working. And it wasn't until we literally backed it up to implementing a really relaxing nervous system routine at the end of the day. It included something called Abhyanga, which is a word of self-massage, even just for two
Mm,
minutes. You know,
love it.
we did like laying on a towel in the bathroom, like just to let the oil sink in. I mean, this might sound crazy for people, but this moved the needle for her.
Yes.
Her symptoms changed, and it wasn't another pill. Actually, we took some
Yes.
of the supplements away because she came in with like
Yes.
50
Yes.
supplements. We took some away, right? And so I just feel like that's important to mention for anyone who's just really been trying all the things, but maybe skip this one really important part that we could go back
Yes.
to.
And that's really goes back to how our story impacts what's going on in our body and just really remembering it can be these small little moments. And at this stage in my life, just a little hint to everybody, you know, I am trying to be tuned in to where that ramp up happens, right?
Mhm.
Like, woo, 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 woo. Like I can tell when I'm getting ramped up. I can tell if I drink coffee, which I love, versus matcha, which I also love, but I love a cup of coffee, that ramps me up even more so that I'm more in that sympathetic dominant, that fight or flight place. And so that awareness is a muscle. And the more we can think into what got me ramped or what am I feeling or like what's that heart racing or why am I feeling angry and just stop and pause and recognize it and not we don't need to fix it.
Mhm.
This isn't about like recognizing it to do something about it. It's about self-awareness.
Yeah, and everything starts with self-awareness. Everything. I mean, I think with everything I teach in my book, it all starts with that self-awareness. And I love how
Yes.
you said it doesn't mean that you have to fix it. It's
Yes.
just the acknowledgement, oh wow, when I'm in this environment, I really feel it.
Yes.
Or when I'm around this person, I really can feel my nervous system change. Or you mentioned
Exactly.
coffee. It could be other foods for you. It
Yes.
could be so many different factors. It could be when you open up your calendar and you see no white space. For me, that's one. If I
Yes.
open it, I see no, people talk about this time blocking where you have to schedule all your other activities. And I'm always like, you know what? I will do those things. But when I put them, when I fill every single white space, it almost makes me feel paralyzed.
Yeah,
So that's
exactly.
a good example of how everyone is different. Some people love to have every minute scheduled,
Yes.
and it
Yeah.
won't do that to them.
Yes.
So, for the women who are listening, and we're going to start to wrap up,
Yes.
you know, they're hearing us talk about the way we think. They're definitely noticing that we're totally geeking out on all this. Talk for 20 hours about everything. And they're thinking, where in the world do I start? How
Yes.
do I turn down? Right now, I have the image of the old TV. the big box TVs.
Yeah.
I just went into a hospice patient house not that long ago, and I'm telling you, Andrea, he had one of those TVs, like one of the first
Oh,
TVs, the big, huge TV, right? You can hear when you turn the dial, it's like click, click, click. Maybe I'm aging myself, but you see that you're turning down the dial on all the noise that's out there, and you want to know where is a place that I can start.
yes. Yes. So I have my three non-negotiables, and it sounds like you have six pillars that you work with. For me, it's always sleep, poop, blood sugar balance,
Mhm.
and one of those things and being curious with one of those things. So let's say we're taking sleep. That doesn't mean, hey, you have to sleep better, go sleep. It means, let me get curious. What is happening? How is my sleep? How do I feel about my sleep? Is there anything I'd like to work on with my sleep that I can either tune into for myself or talk to somebody about? And starting to notice the little shifts. Now, what I want to say, I think you had a term about it, like what's your door
I
metaphor?
say small hinges swing big doors.
Small hinges swing big doors. I always say it's the simplicity on the other side of complexity.
Mhm.
So I can talk to you for days about what sleep is going to do for your digestion, your hormones, your inflammation. Sleep does help all the things we're looking to serve. So it is a way that is in our, I don't want to say control, but influence to be able to say, could my sleep be better? Do I have the things I need to sleep better? For me, and I'm just going to give an example, what I learned over time, this even happened when I had hot flashes, is if I got to sleep earlier, I was able to fall asleep easier, stay asleep better, and not have hot flashes. If I passed a window, and for me that's like 10 to 10:30, like if I go to sleep between 8:30 and 10, my sleep is golden. If I go past 10, I'm going to have issues, and that's likely where I'm going to have more symptoms through the night and then more cravings in the day, more blood sugar swings. So, sleep is huge. So, that's one, but you can choose. I want to focus on my poop, or I'm really curious about my blood sugar because Rachel said that it's the base of my hormones and I want to work on that. But those are the three non negotiables that are small hinges that swing really, really big doors in our health. And they're not a one and done, they're their own big exploration. But I had one other thing I wanted to give as a tip.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, in addition to that physiological piece, the kind of social piece comes back to that pause. And I just want to remind everybody that nobody profits from that pause
Mhm.
but you. And so, just take 24 hours and notice what you're told to do and what is inspired in you
Mm.
to want to do it
Mm.
and sit with it. So if you're being told that here's the next, I'm trying to think about what I've been seeing on my feed lately. There's definitely stuff for eye puffiness, like masks with LEDs and like little lasers and not do your eye drops. Like there's that going on. There's so much that we're fed that is because of what we might say or do or think or want. And so watch what's coming to you and watch in yourself what makes you want. What do I want out of that? What am I looking to do? And you may already be doing
Mm.
things that help that. You may not need to buy that thing. You may realize something about yourself that is, oh, I didn't know I was worried about that, but I actually am worried about that. And should I be worried about that? Let me take a pause. Maybe that's nothing to worry about. So I don't know if that practice is helpful. I led a group through a practice like that, and we kept a little spreadsheet
Mm.
of what was fed to you, what arose in you, and what did you do about it?
Ooh, I really like that. I might have to add that into my program. I teach something called a pattern awareness inventory. And the pattern awareness inventory, I want to tell you about that some other time because it's such an amazing tool for people to just kind of learn. But I love what you said, to just kind of notice the input. And that could be
Yes.
from social media, it could be from, people in your life, like
Yep.
it could be
Totally.
coming from anything.
Yep.
And you're taking a moment. What is this bringing up for me? And
Yes.
then what am I going to do about it? And I
Yeah.
love one thing that is so cool about that, nervous system wise, is you're creating a space between the stimulus and the response. Right
Yes.
now, there's like a really fast response. I see
Yes.
something, all I have to do is buy something with one or two
Yep.
clicks, and it's
Yep.
at my house like tomorrow, right?
Yes.
And when you take a minute and you pause, again, who's profiting off the pause? You're creating space. Over time, that space actually grows if
Yes.
you practice that. You have
Yes.
a beautiful ability to almost think before you act.
Yes.
In my
Yes.
book, I really go deep into that because I think it's really important to be able to, we've heard this growing up, like think before you act. But
Yes.
now it's like
Exactly.
think before you click.
Yes. Yes. And if I may just end with one story, I said my son lives in Tokyo. When I go to Japan, they're not fixated on, and I'm not saying it's a perfect culture, it's got its own underpinnings, but they're not fixated on creatine and collagen and peptides and, you know, macro counting. They're eating real food,
Mm,
period. And there's such a beauty to being in a space where all that noise is just really different. And I don't even know if I can feel their noise because it's not the noise we're tuned into.
mm,
But we have to recognize that what we're experiencing is particular to the corporate consumer culture that we live in. It's
mhm,
not really meant to help us. And
mm.
so we have to unplug a little bit to find our way forward and back to feeling like ourselves again.
Yes, and remember, everyone, while that is the culture, you also have a choice of how plugged in you are. Another thing I always teach is the power of input. So if
Yes.
you are getting tons of input from whatever you're getting it from, and you're feeling like I'm not in control, I'm not leading my life, I'm this consumer stuff feels like it's going to bury me. What would happen if you just took like, I would like to say 24 hours, but what if it was even like, I don't know, 2 hours where you
Yeah.
just were. And
Yes.
maybe you were working or you're doing your thing, but there wasn't a whole bunch of input coming in. And maybe you get to curate the input that you are letting in. Like you get to curate that. You can decide. And that's really exciting. So, Andrea, I just cannot tell you how honored I have been to spend this time with you. It feels like, I don't know, before this call, before we hit record, I was literally trying to do some grounding for myself because I was so excited. I didn't know if I'd be able to. And I didn't even look at my questions, but I think we touched on some really great stuff. I'm just so glad you're here. Can you tell people, I know you're writing a book, which is so exciting. Anyone who follows you, we're going to be like your first, best, biggest fans and readers.
Thank you.
Tell everyone where they can find you so they can follow your work.
Yeah, thank you so much. And thank you for inviting me and spending this time together. I had so much fun being with you. You can find me at Andrea Nakayama on all the platforms. The place to really follow my work right now is on Substack. So you can find me at Andrea Nakayama on Substack, where I'm publishing writing and conversations weekly. And that will keep you up to date on all the things coming with the book.
Awesome. Yeah. So Substack, and I will put all the links that we talked about, and I'll put some other links in the show notes. You can also find those always on my website at rachelcartarrn.com. And if you don't know how to spell that, now you can find it on livinginspiredtoday.com. That goes to the same place. Very exciting, really easy, livinginspiredtoday.com. You go to the podcast and you'll be able to see this written out in blog form, and you'll be able to find all the links so that you can make sure you stay in the orbit of Andrea because she has so much wisdom to share. It's been a true honor. And listener, I want you to take a minute for yourself because you have listened to us talk. Maybe you've understood some stuff. Maybe you haven't understood everything. We tried to bring it down to you. But what you've done is you've expanded your awareness of what's possible. You've also allowed yourself to just be in this positive input space, a place where I really want to help remove the noise for you. And I'm just so proud of you for being here. So just take a moment for yourself. You can put your hand on your heart if you like, and just, you've done it. You've taken a moment to just really be there for yourself. And that's where healing starts, in this moment. So thank you for being here, and we'll see you on the next episode. If you've been listening to my podcast for a while, or maybe you found me on Instagram at Peace and Perimenopause, and you've been realizing that something here sounds so spot on. You feel it in your gut that you know that there's more to your symptoms and that they're all connected and that there is a solution. You don't have to figure this out alone, and you can learn more about working with me at rachelcardarn.com. Here you can book a session and we can talk about what's going on for you and how I can help. There's no reason to keep struggling. You have every reason to make this call if you feel like this is the year where you're finally going to start feeling better, where you're finally going to feel calm in your body, not rushed all the time or dealing with horrible symptoms. Maybe you're ready to feel confident, finally, right? What are we waiting for? And maybe you're ready to feel like yourself again, only a lot better, because now you're empowered. You know exactly what health habits are going to move the needle for you. You're finally ready to stop chasing those quick fixes and find something that actually works. I always say, small hinges swing big doors. Let's figure out what those hinges are for you so that you can live the life you were always designed to live. Thank you so much for tuning in to the Living Inspired podcast. Your presence in this space is deeply appreciated. Remember, living a healthy life, mind, body, and spirit doesn't happen by accident. It's the result of conscious choices and intentional living. Each time you listen, you are taking a step towards flooding your life with positivity, love, light, and health. If you found value in today's episode, please share it with 3 friends. I'm honored to be part of your journey. I'll see you in the next episode.